What is up, everybody? We're going to use some wall fart stickers to do some masking, a lot of satisfying tape pulling, and some brake lines to add some detail, some 6 drooling hours of engine detail with little tiny copper wires, and some red noodles, and some really crooked holes. In a seat that had literally no detail whatsoever. This is a Revel style Tamiya kit. It's awesome. Alright, let's get into it. This is the Tamiya's high-end cape, 1/48 scale. Let's go. What is up, everybody? Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and smash that like button if you are liking this content. Well, this is the 1/48 scale high-end kit by Tamiya, and this is just a super easy kit. It's not a super awesome kit, but it's a super easy kit. So let's just go over some minor things here. There is no recessed panel lines other than the ailerons and the moving surfaces, and so that's kind of surprising, it being a Tamiya kit, but it's a very old kit, so it makes sense. The interior detail is basically, no, there's literally nothing in the interior detail. So I make some modifications. Based on some reference photos that I found of KI84s, they didn't have a square seat like this, so I don't know why the kit offered this, but it was a super old kit. So I sanded down the edges to make it a more round chair, more like the shape in an actual KI84, marked some holes because there were holes in it for the seat belts, and drilled them out super crooked. But that's just kind of what we do here sometimes, is we just do things too fast and find out later that we have to change it. Yep. Whoopsies. Okay, on to the interior. Let's pull some wires out of a wire and attach them using some CA. This just adds a little extra detail that you didn't have before and makes your model look a little bit better. Now onto the motor. This took a long time of figuring out how to attach these copper wires. I used CA, sometimes super glue, and nothing really worked. I think the CA worked a little bit better, but I could be wrong there. I don't know which one worked better. But I spent a lot of time attaching these wires to the middle of it, as there was no detail in this motor at all. And looking at actual reference photos, it was a super cool looking motor. You had tubes and pipes and things going all over, so I just tried to mimic that as best as possible, especially with these red noodles. Now the red noodles and this little tiny wire coming off, I tried to match perfectly to an actual KI84 engine, and I think I did a pretty good job. Also, I applied these ribs. I don't know what they would actually be for, but it looked like they were just tubes coming out in that certain direction. I applied a wire all the way around it and then painted it black. Now painting this motor. I wanted a different type of look. I wanted it to be kind of bronzy and brassy, so I'm dry brushing this brass color on, and in a fashion just randomly kind of going over every single area. I wanted that kind of tone to come through the silver that I'd apply later. Now I'm dry brushing it with a steel color and just kind of going over those areas to null those brassy areas down, because I just wanted to show a little bit of brassiness, not too much. Then I paint some gold connector pieces, as a real airplane has these. Then I re-drill my holes in a straight fashion, not a crooked one, and it looks great. I sand the holes down and apply some Tamiya putty for a seat cushion. Once I let it dry for a little while, I then make some cracks and indents in it so that it looks like a real worn-in leather seat. I don't think a real KI84 had a seat cushion, but I just wanted some extra detail in that seat, and since I wasn't putting a pilot in it. Now I cut some lines in the rudder pedals, as they weren't very detailed, so I just wanted to accent those a little bit more. Then out of some bendy tape, I call it, I stick it through the holes and make it in a fashion that makes it look like there's seatbelts. I don't think this is actually how the seatbelts were lined up, but it just adds some extra detail that didn't have it before. And now I rip up a sponge and apply some chipping methods to the interior of the cockpit. Again, I usually just dip the sponge in some paint and then brush a little bit off on a paper towel and then apply it to my model. This, I'm using an interior tan color to paint this bottom part, as it was a little bit tan in a real one. Now I'm using some interior weathering solutions by Tamiya to give this interior a little bit of life and make it look a little bit lived in. I like doing this in a really fast fashion. Before it even dries, I apply my paint thinner to thin it all out and make it go into all the grooves better than it did the first time. Once it's all evened out, I can put it in the actual cockpit, and you can see there it has a nice weathered effect. You can see those wires in there, and now I can connect the model together. The fit of this KI84 actually fits more like a Revel kit, to be honest. It's not as bad as some Revel kits, but it definitely did not fit together like a standard Tamiya kit. I had to do a lot of sanding and a lot of filling in order to get this right. After trimming and sanding some areas, now I can clean up the model and clean up all this excess paint that's on it. Now I rescribe the exhaust lines to make it more like they're separate entities instead of just one little block of exhaust lines. Later in the build, I do some really cool rust effects on this area. I really wanted to put some time into these exhaust manifolds, as it kind of gives this model a little bit more life. What it has already isn't very detailed, so I wanted to just make it a point to make sure that these were really realistic. So I drill some holes in these in the exhaust as well, just to give it that extra little oomph, if you know what I'm talking about. I think that drilling these holes really added some depth into this model, and I think it really worked out. I've never tried this method before, and I'm just glad that I didn't ruin the model while I was doing it. This is the smallest drill that I have, actually, and it was perfect. I put some Tamiya stuff on it and rescribe all my panel lines after I was done sanding. This is a Micromark micro saw, and it works great for this. It was a bit tricky assembling the engine and the cockpit after putting all the new stuff on it, but it worked out great. And the cowling fits on really well. Now I can put the wings on and everything and move on from there. Now I assemble the wings. They fit okay, but there was a big gap in the left wing. Let me know in the comments if I did this wrong. I may have put the wings on a little bit crooked, so just let me know in the comments and if you had the same problem. But I just apply some water to get this white putty out of there. I really like the water-based putty, as it's super easy to use and makes a very smooth surface every single time for these big gaps. Then I'd use some black green for the interior and put on the head cushion. I realize now that halfway through this build I've been talking like a hypnotist, so if I have and it bugs you, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it's going to be in this video. I'm painting this nose cone red and this flat red by Vallejo, and that seems to be a pretty good color. As I paint all the decals the same color, I really wanted them to match. Now I'm painting the back of the prop, this brown, it's actually German red brown that I'm painting it with. Here I am thinking US propellers are terrible to paint. No, this propeller sucked. Painting stripes and all that crap. Now I use some Tamiya tape, and I also use just some clear Christmas tape and put over the model, and I'm trying this method for the first time. Never done it this way, but I've seen someone do it before. It worked out, but it was super hard to pull off. But it did work, so there is that. And now I apply some clear glue and stick that to the model. I like using clear glue because it fills in some gaps, and there's also no risk of fogging any of your windshields, as that has happened to me before. So I stick on the canopy, and now I'm ready to prime. I prime it with black Vallejo primer, and I don't really like this stuff, honestly. It doesn't go on nicely. It kind of is watery and splotchy, and I have to strain my paint every time I use it, so it's not my preferred method, but I have like 80 milliliters of it, so I gotta go through it somehow. It is nice though, because it leaves a nice glossy surface for aluminum effects after. And it sticks to the model really well. I haven't had a problem with it ever, so there's that too. So I paint the whole model in aluminum for some chipping effects later. Now I'm spraying the wheel wells with a Tokay this clear blue color. It is actually a clear blue, so you want to spray the aluminum first and then that Atoke color over it. Now I apply some chipping fluid on areas that I'd like to chip later, and I'm putting the liquid tape on the wheel wells so that I can cover it up that Atoke color and paint the model. Now I paint the underside with some sky blue and I apply an even coat over the whole thing, as I'm going to do some post shading to this model. So I added a little bit of a blue color and some black to just highlight some panels and make some panels stand out more than just the regular sky blue, as this will give that underside a little bit of life and some wear and tear as to some panels being switched out or whatever, repainted, or just anything like that. So I add some white to that as it alters the color a little bit, and I do this several different times, doing it to multiple different panels. Now I apply some IJN black green, and this color actually wasn't the right color. As in reference photos, it was kind of a bluish dark green rather than a really light forest green type of color. So I applied this to the model first, and not knowing that this was not the right color, as in Vallejo's color line there's two different black greens. So there's just black green and then there's IJN black green. So what I did was I used this to my advantage. Basically, this is my first color, and I applied the whole model with a nice thin coat as to give it a little bit of translucency, as some Zeros did have some translucency in their models. So I used this to my advantage, and then I added some black to this color and accented the panel lines and some post shading, carefully going around each panel line with my airbrush and making sure not to add too much. My airbrush was thinned out pretty much 70-30. I usually do 50-50, it's just easier, but because I wanted to do more detailed panel lines, I did about 70-30 and went around every single little area and just painted it multiple times in order to get that dark shade to come out. I added some white to that color and painted certain panels a lighter shade of gray, and I just keep adding a couple drops of white here and there to give each panel its own kind of look. I think that this is really important as to give this model a certain type of look and just a really worn in type of altered panel line look. I think that this works best on green because it's such a dark color, and it ended up being such a dark color. So doing this made it so that it wasn't too sun damaged yet. I actually go back with this black green and redo some panels so that it's a lot darker. Now I'm applying a thin layer of the same color and realizing that it's not dark enough for this type of aircraft. So I go in and take my black green, redo all the panel lines, and fill in some of these areas. But I also add some white to this dark green or black green, and make those panels really stand out. Super contrast panels. It's almost like a gray type of color actually, but this is just white added to the black green, and I'm just applying it to those other panels, and then I'm going to do a watered down type of coat after this so that it all blends together nice and good. You can still see the accented panel lines, but it's going to be that nice green color that we all like for these Japanese Air Corps. And there you go. And I just kind of leave the top kind of as is, as it gave it a really good, nice sun damaged look. Like I said, that translucency is really nice. So now I'm masking off the decals. Now I've used Tamiya decals and they suck. So I just said, you know what? I'm just gonna straight off the bat, I'm not gonna use them, and I'm just gonna mask this off and try my best. I've never masked off any insignias or anything, so this is my first time doing it, and it worked out great. So I'm using some sticky notes to mask off this area, and I tape this bottom so that there's no overspray. This is the first airplane I've had that actually did not get any overspray, which I'm super happy about. So I'm just using some insignia white and then pre-shading the area that's going to be red. So I use the white and the pre-shading to give this red a little bit of life, as if you put white underneath red, it really makes it kind of look worn, and that's the type of look I was going for. So you can definitely see the panel lines in the red color, and you can see that little bit of sun damage type of look. After I do a couple coats of red, I can then put a sticker on it from Walmart and then peel it off. These stickers worked, and I mean, look, it just came out really good. I'd never tried this method before, but circles are pretty easy, so once I get to the American insignias, it might be a little bit different, but it all worked. All the paint stuck and nothing tore off, and it's just, I think I got this down. Now, I knock on wood, I think I got this part down as to paint not peeling off, so I don't know what happened, but something worked. And now I can paint the orange yellow on these types of spots. I didn't have any orange yellow. I just put a drop of red and some yellow, and that seemed to work just fine for some orange yellow. As you can see, it's a really rich color, and I think it's the right color. I mean, who knows? I think it's the right color. It looks deep and dark and orangey and yellow, and not too orangey and not too red, so I think it worked. Now I can satisfyingly peel this tape off and show you my next step. And as you can see, there's no paint peeling off, so it's just super nice. I did have to go back and touch up that underbelly, but that wasn't too big of a deal. Now I gloss coat the areas that are going to get these Tamiya decals. Now I'm working on the landing gear part and the propeller, apparently. I didn't know that this clip was right there. So I used some super glue to attach this wire, and that didn't work, and I used CA and that didn't work, and I used super glue again and that kind of worked, and then CA again and that didn't work. I don't know what worked. I clipped the ends to make the brake lines, and that was it. I had enough of that. That was just a painful process. I think I need to attach it to the actual plastic instead of the painted area. Now I apply the decals with some Mr. Hobby decal solution, and these went on just fine. They went on and they didn't flash or anything. I've got to say though, don't use too much of this decal solution because it does actually end up embedding in the paint, so be careful about that. This decal went on fine, but these horizontal stabilizers were no good. They are crooked as all get out, which I make it very apparent that you can't see, but they were crooked as donkey's teeth, so just remember that. Now I'm using some Tamiya black panel wash and just making this area nice and weathered. I'm using some paint thinner to just wear down these areas and then brush them in the direction of airflow. Before this step, I actually coated it with a matte finish as to make this weathering effect stick a little bit better than a gloss finish, and I think it actually worked pretty well. So that's another tip for you, is paint your surface matte instead of gloss in order to make, especially on raised panel lines, especially on non-recessed panel lines, because it's tough to get that nice weathering effect on it. So this really helped as to make it a matte coat and then do your washes and stuff. Now I'm applying this rust, all these rust different colors, and you just apply 10 different rust colors and then add some black smoke after it, and then you're good to go. This is the newest exhaust finish that I've experienced. It's super easy, and it's the best thing that I've found is these powders from Tamiya. I mean, seriously, it's so easy to use. There's no airbrush mess, and you don't accidentally spray your whole model with water. It's just super easy, nice way to do really, really good looking exhaust effects. So now I just used some black and some white and some brown to just blend everything in. This is my chipping method, and it actually worked after all these coats of paint. So all the paint and plus the matte coat, and I was still able to get some nice chipping effects on this model. And I'm just ripping the heck out of this thing, and that's on purpose because these things were literally just torn apart. By the end of the war, they were just a mess. So I really wanted to depict that in all this chipping stuff. So this is the first method. I'm just using a toothpick and scraping away any area that I applied that chipping fluid to. And as you can see, you can go around each panel and make it look actually like it was chipped. And it gives a nice raised edge to that chip, and yeah, it just works really well. I do brush the model with a little bit of water and just let that water work and let the chemical work. And then once it's dried, I'm able to go in with my toothpick and chip it away. The next method I use is a sponge, just like I did before, and I just coat the sponge, damp it off in a paper towel, and then apply it to the model as so. I twist around the sponge a lot to make sure that there's different effects going on each area. Sometimes having the sponge a little bit more wet is preferred, as it gives it a nicer texture than having it dry. But if you have a dry sponge, then it's going to have a very faint and kind of spread out texture. Whereas if you have a wet one, it will have a nice look to it. So now I'm finished with the chipping. As you can see, it's very weathered, and I can apply some. Actually, I needed super glue for these landing gear as they were super loose. And you can see here how hard it was to get that masking tape off of, well, it was actually Christmas wrapping tape off of the canopy here. It was super hard to get off. Very risky, but I couldn't see the Tamiya tape. I couldn't see the lines through the Tamiya tape. So let me know in the comments if you have any clear tape ideas that aren't as sticky as wrapping paper tape. Now I can apply one of the last steps of this model is to put on this antenna. I use some CA and attach the CA to the rubber, and it seems to work pretty good. Now I apply a drop of CA and attach the rubber to the rubber, and then after that's dry, then I can stretch it down to right above the 0. On a lot of reference photos, I've seen the wire like this on both sides of the model. Once it's completely dry and stuck to the model, I can then cut the excess off. And here we go. Thank you guys so much again for watching. I really appreciate every view, every like, subscribe if you'd like to, and you like my content. I'll be doing a lot of Tamiya kits in the future, and this one just worked out really great. I'll be doing every single decal version of every kit I build, so make sure you stay tuned to all these types, and you'll get to learn how to build every single model that you like. And so thank you guys so much again for every subscription and every view. It really does help me out a lot, and I just really appreciate you guys and love this hobby so much. So thank you guys again for watching, and let's get back to building. Enjoy the rest of these photos.